Marvel Snap is a party game. Well, okay, at least it should be. I know that's a crazy statement. Like, how could you say that? It's a party game, but hold on, I have my reasons, and they're actually pretty good, I think. But before we get into that, let's talk about what Marvel Snap is and what my problems with it are.
Let me show you how to scratch it.
Marvel Snap is a mobile, and I guess computer game, that's about building a deck of cards based on Marvel characters and capturing zones with them. Whoever controls the most zones wins. It's a little bit more deep than that, but that's basically the core gameplay. Now, that seems pretty straightforward, so what's my problem? Well, getting new cards sucks. The game starts you off with a full deck of cards, just like pretty basic ones, just so you can get a feel for the game. But after that, getting new cards that you want can be really challenging. There isn't a store where you can go and buy them with in-game currency. Instead, the primary way of getting new cards is by upgrading your current cards in your collection to increase your collection level to eventually get new random cards. I totally understand the point of leveling up the current cards that you have in order to get newer, better cards, but I think the system sucks still. Rather than be rewarded with something that I want, it's completely up to the game on what card I get. I have no way of actually choosing my reward, so the chance I get something that's useless to me or that I straight up don't want is very high. Now, early on, this isn't that much of an issue because you get cards pretty frequently, every like 3 or so levels. But as you start to get a little higher, it starts to get really annoying. New cards are granted out every like 12 levels as opposed to 3, which means that if you go 12 levels and you get a new card that you don't want, sucks for you, man. Gotta wait another 12 levels. The game has an indirect way of controlling how you play based on what cards it gives you. For example, I got Carnage super early, which is awesome because I really like Carnage. You know, he destroys all the other cards there. It's pretty cool. I got a decent synergies. You know, I got my Nova, I got my Wolverine, but it's not really enough for a good deck. And then I saw Venom, and I really like Venom because I'm like, oh my god, he's like Carnage, but he's also really cool. And so I was like, okay, now I just need to wait and hope that I can get Venom. It took me until after level 500 to get Venom, where he just so happened to be featured in my store for free. But even though I have Venom, I'm still boned when it comes to making a proper destroy deck because I'm still missing the two biggest factors, which are null and death. And again, I have no way of actually getting those cards without being extremely lucky that they show up in a store, maybe, or I just randomly pull them, which is, again, very lucky.
Oh, magic conch shell, what do we need to do to get
A proper deck.
Nothing.
The only other consistent way to get cards is to just buy them with real world money, but I don't really feel like spending 15 Canadian dollars on one single card. I, as the player, can't set my mind on a goal and work towards that goal. All I have to do is look at something and pray that the game gives it to me. And the problem doesn't get better with the higher level you are either. I would even say it gets a little worse. After level 500, your guaranteed cards are replaced with something called collector's caches, which either give a random card or currency. And I think once you get all the cards, it just gives you a random variant, which makes it so your chances of getting new cards goes down even further, because you can go the 12 levels or whatever, but now there's only a 50% chance that you even get a card, nevertheless, if it's even good. They try to balance this with collector's tokens, which lets you buy rare cards, which I will say is not bad. I just wish I didn't have to wait till after level 500 to do this. The early game restrictions don't really make it more fun for me. They just make it harder to build actually good decks. And while we're talking about building decks, issues with getting new cards directly impact the quality of your decks, and it sucks because that's the whole point of the game. The point of the game is to build strong, clever decks to beat your opponent, but I can't do that without the proper cards for it. So now I have to make do with the cards that I have in my inventory, which is fine, I understand that, except for the fact that I am now at a direct disadvantage to my opponent who has a full deck with all the cards that they need. Because now I'm stuck with my sloppy seconds trying to make something happen, which is a lot easier said than done. Now, before someone inevitably mentions it, yes, you can get all of the cards in this game. So how long does it take you? Like a month, 2 months? Well, I asked my friend Zachary, and he reassured me that it only took him 4 to 5 months.
Look at the plane!
We'll fix it.
Fix it? How are you gonna fix this?
Grit, spin, and a whole lot of duct tape. We should be up and running in, say, 6 to 9 months.
4 to 5 months?
Oh, 6 to 9 months.
4 to 5 months. But that's assuming he played every day for like half an hour, which is okay, that's only like 60 hours. So my question is, what's keeping me here? What is holding me for those 60 hours until I get everything? I can't reliably get cards I want or build decks that I want, so why should I keep playing? Just to lose again and again in competitive game modes because my cards are inferior to my opponents? Oh yeah, and
Now you're all in big trouble.
I'm not joking. The only way to play a casual match with someone is through a friendly battle, which still has a competitive health system, ripped directly from Conquest, which we'll get to later, and requires a new code each time, which means basically you have to know whoever you're fighting against and be in constant communication, which is great if you're doing casual multiplayer, but if you're doing single player, sucks for you, I guess. I'm glad they have this feature, I really am. I'm just sad that it's locked behind multiplayer. So what about single player then? Well, there's 2 other game modes that make up Marvel Snap. There's the basic one, which is just like the play, or as I like to call it, the ladder. I don't know what it's actually called, but you know what I mean. It's some 1v1 combat against an opponent, pretty straightforward. You draw some cards, you play them, you win the zones. This is the basic mode of the game, and I do think it's pretty good. Games take about 5 minutes, so it's easy to just burst through a few, especially if you're on a bad losing spree. And every win or loss affects your rank differently based on the little cubes. So yeah, your rank goes up and down depending on how many of the little cubes are wagered. It starts out with 1, doubling to 2 at the end of the game. But at any point, a player can do the little snap feature, and they can double the amount of cubes won or lost on the next turn, up to a maximum of 8. I actually don't mind this mechanic. I think it does work pretty well, especially in the ladder, where it's just a series of one-off battles. I think it works pretty great. What I don't like about it is the retreat mechanic. Now, forfeiting is no stranger to competitive games. So many competitive games have it. It only makes sense if you're losing, you just want to quit, and you want to take the loss as is, good. But it's always just been an option in those games and not really a necessity. You cannot get to the highest rank in this game without forfeiting, and that makes games start to feel a lot less fun. Every time that I'm doing really well and I'm having a great time with the deck that I built, my opponent just retreats and the game ends. That's so boring. It creates an environment that encourages backing away from tough battles and making losing way more detrimental if you dare try and salvage a losing game. It makes so many of the battles just feel a lot less fulfilling because I have this deck that's wonderfully built to go 6 rounds and I'm ending at 4 or 5 every time. But I digress, that's just one of the game modes. So now we should probably talk about, oh no. No, not this, please not this. Conquest. Conquest is a mode in which you fight a series of opponents in a gauntlet-style format, getting big rewards at the end if you manage to win. Now, how does this work? When I unlocked Conquest, I assumed it would be like regular matches. You know, you beat someone, you go on to the next. No. I figured it wouldn't really use the snap mechanic because it doesn't really make sense to, right? But oh boy, was I wrong. Conquest introduces the health system, which is also shared by the friendly battles as mentioned earlier. How it works is similar to the ladder, but instead of the cubes raising your rank, they lower your opponent's health. Each player has 10 health, and you can do up to 8 damage with a well-timed snap on both sides. However, for some stupid reason, the creators of this game decided that you can only deal as much damage as the lowest health on the lowest player. Which basically means, let's say round 1, I snap, and my opponent snaps, and I lose, and I take 8 damage, knocking me down to 2 health. Now, both players can only ever do 2 damage, which means if my opponent wants to win, they just have to win once. Whereas if I want to win, I have to win 5 times in a row. And so this creates an environment that works against the snap mechanic. Why would I want to snap when I know that it could mean that I lose the entire conquest? There's much more emphasis on retreating here because taking 1 or 2 damage is way better than 4 or certainly 8. So very, very often, matches will consist of like 6 or 7 rounds played with the same 2 decks fighting each other. So if you walk into someone in Conquest who has a deck that counters yours, tough. Also, remember when I said the games are usually like 5 minutes? Well, if I'm doing 6 or 7, it is very easy to hit 30 to 35 minutes with one single round of Conquest, especially when each player is retreating every single round. Rather than this epic gauntlet, Conquest just feels like a super tedious, death by 1,000 cuts ass cockroach fight, with each player trying to die last rather than win. And again, you're using the same deck for 30 minutes. There's only so much fun I can have with that. Another thing I don't like about this competitive game is how reliant on being secretive and catching opponents off guard it is.
Bring it on!
2 targets remaining.
Not only do I have no idea what cards my opponent has unlocked, maybe all of them, I don't know what cards they have in their deck. And I know at like incredibly high tiers of this game that doesn't really become an issue because you kind of sort of recognize every deck based on the first few cards, but I haven't sunk my 130 hours into this game, so I don't know that yet. I can't tell you how many times I've lost or won because my opponent played a card that I've never seen before. Countless times I've lost turn 6 after a really strong lead because my opponent plays a card I could never have guessed that they had, and vice versa. I've won tons of games where I'm losing, but then I play the Incredible Hulk, and I just win because they didn't prepare for that. And when I win like that, I don't feel like I deserve it or that I played better than my opponent. They didn't counter a card that they didn't know that I have, so they lose. Shame on them, I guess, for not planning for every possible outcome. In Conquest or friendly battles, I guess, too, the secrecy aspect kind of goes away after a few rounds, making it a bit more skill-based, I'd say. Still, the whole idea of surprising your opponent doesn't sit right with me in the context of a competitive game. Let's look at Pokemon, for example, another competitive game. For many years, your Pokemon and your opponents would remain hidden at the start of the battle, so you didn't know who was on their team. But when Pokemon like Zoroark came out, who can disguise itself as another member of your team, it shook the meta up. So what they did was they made it so rather than hiding your team, it just shows the 6 Pokemon that you've got. Because the point of the game wasn't about surprising your opponent necessarily, it was about knowing what your opponent does and can do and adapting your strategy around it. I know my opponent has a Zoroark, so I'm gonna play how I would, knowing that they have a Zoroark. And when it comes to Marvel Snap, you can't do that. A preview of your opponent's cards would be really helpful because it would allow you and your opponent to strategize around each other's decks and play accordingly. I wish Marvel Snap had something like that, seeing as you can pretty much only play this game competitively, which is sad to me because... Hold on. Interlude. No. Interlude. Wait. This game is fucking ridiculous, dude. By far my favorite part of the game is seeing how the mechanics of the cards interact with each other. Sometimes it feels like bullshit, but you gotta admit, it's hilarious. My favorite deck to use is one that I made just to be inconvenient to my opponent, and it's really fun. But like, come on, man. There's 3 random locations every game, each one that gives either a buff or a debuff, or sometimes nothing. And it's all decided by the game what happens. Sure, there's some strategy in going for the safe location or not, but let's be real with ourselves here. Unless you have the one specific card that lets you see the locations, it's all just luck. If I see, okay, the first spot that's revealed gives me -1 power, so I'm not gonna go there, I'm gonna go somewhere else. What is stopping the other 2 locations from being even worse? You could get all 3 zones that boost your deck, or all 3 that hurt it. And that's not skill. I didn't play bad if the game chooses zones that counter my deck. That's just being unlucky. And at that point, I really just have to question how much of the game is skill and playing cards well versus how much of it is luck and even drawing those cards from your deck in the first place. There's a level of skill to this game, without a doubt, but to say that that's all it is ridiculous. Between random cards unlocked, random zones, random card draws, shit, even your random starting hand. The level of pure luck that takes place in this game is so high that, in my opinion, I can't really take anyone who plays this game seriously. It's like Mario Party. Sure, you could know every inch of every map and come first in every minigame, but at the end of the day, it's still a luck of the dice. That's why I am formally making the motion to...
Assemble.
Not actually, but hear me out. This game is wacky and ridiculous, right? So why not lean into it a bit more? Give us a random deck mode that each game randomly gives you 12 cards out of the cards that you have. Maybe with a set number of cards per energy cost so you don't get stuck with just 12 6-cost cards. Doesn't that sound fun as hell? And if it doesn't, just don't play it. I'm dying for a mode that's not competitive because right now, the only way for me to test out a deck that doesn't detriment me in some sort of rank is Proving Grounds in Conquest, which we already covered, and you already know why I don't like Conquest. And on the topic of adding less competitive modes, why not just a casual play mode with no snap mechanic? Believe it or not, casual players still have money, and they still want to buy cool cosmetics. I honestly don't understand this obsession with the snap mechanic either. Like, I get that's what the game is called, so you gotta have it in every mode, but why? It's an optional mechanic. You can go 20, 30 matches without ever using it and have the exact same experience. But I do believe there is a way to make Conquest better and more engaging. Number 1 is my fave, which is just straight up make each round a best of 3. Shit, you could even do best of 5 if you really wanted. Just ditch the boring ass snap mechanic and just make it straight up who wins, who has the better deck, who plays better. I've had so many Conquest rounds where I will go 4-0 for the first 4 matches, but they'll retreat every time, so they'll only take 4 damage. So then I'll snap again, and they'll snap again, and suddenly I'm at 2 health and they're at 6. We've only played 5 rounds. I've won 4 of them, but my opponent is now suddenly winning because they chose to press a button at a certain time. Another solution is to make the players have 15 health, but remove the weird ass cap on how much damage you can do. That way, if you take too much damage early on, it's not an insanely difficult grind for you to get back up. If anything, it would encourage the use of the snap mechanic more because there is more health to lose. You're fine taking 2 damage because you got 15 health now, baby. Another fix for Conquest would be to make it so that once per Conquest match, players can switch their decks around so as to not make repeat battles feel stale. While we're at it, let's add more game modes to just make it fun and wacky. Give me a 3 or 4 person free-for-all. Maybe add an extra zone in there. Make it so leveling up your cards gives you a little bit of currency maybe for a new shop to buy some early game cards that don't rotate, even if they cost a crazy amount. Give me something to feasibly work towards without relying solely on the game to give it to me. All right, I feel like at this point I'm just talking in circles, so I'm gonna end with this. Marvel Snap is fun, but I think it could be a lot more fun. It acts like this super competitive game, like super serious and so strategy, ooh, while doing so much stuff to actively harm how serious it's taken as a competitive game. You can't look me in the face and say it's a skill-based game when I play 1 card on Danger Room and it explodes, but my opponent plays 4 and they're all fine. That's not skill, that's luck. It's just random goofy luck, and that's fine. I don't mind random goofy luck. It makes for some hilarious outcomes. But the game doesn't really lean into that at all. It just tries to be so serious. Like, ooh, I'm so mysterious, I'm wearing a hoodie in the supermarket. But you're not mysterious. I know you're buying blueberries. Maybe it's just my general dislike for deck building games, but Marvel Snap is no exception. One day I hope this game changes its course and introduces more casual elements and maybe leans into the wackiness a bit more. But I have a feeling that that's not gonna happen anytime soon. I'll keep playing as long as my friends are, but honestly, as soon as they dip, I can't really see myself sticking around for very long. I'm giving Marvel Snap a 6 out of 10. Good try, but make the game fun next time, please. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked the video, let me know. I am hoping to do a lot more of these kind of videos in the future. This is the reason I started my Twitch channel in the first place, so I figured it's about time that I do some. Big thanks to my friend Ryley for editing this. He is so beautiful and so handsome. His links are in the description. Go check him out. Check me out on Twitch. Also in the description. Subscribe on YouTube. Press the up. And I'll see you Monday or Friday. I don't know when this is coming out. Have a good day.